Hello, my name is Moheeb Abualqumboz, and today in week 11 we're going to talk about narrative analysis. Just to have an overview of what narrative analysis is, as you can see on the screen, it originated from the literary theory and narratology. So it's about actually narrating things like in day-to-day narrations. And it became popular in social sciences from 90s onwards. It is defined as an organized interpretation of a sequence of events. Murray 2003. And you can see another definition here of narratives as a sequence of events, experiences, or actions with a plot that ties together different parts into a meaningful whole. So simply said, narrative analysis is analyzing narrative, but obviously this narrative has to take a specific shape or form. So there could be like a plot which ties obviously different pieces of text or talk into a meaningful whole. Riesman, 2008, beautifully described narrative analysis as in everyday oral storytelling, a speaker connects events into a sequence that is consequential for later action and for the meanings that the speaker wants listeners to take away from the story. So actually, as you can see here, it's a deliberate attempt. The speaker wants to make sure that the listener can take something out of the story. Hence, the narrative could have a different meaning or interpretation from the event. I continue reading the definition. Events perceived by the speaker as important are selected, organized, connected, and evaluated as meaningful for a particular audience. So again, it's the speaker who believes that there is important story to tell. So they select that story, they organize it, they connect it, and then this is being evaluated as very meaningful. By who? By the audience. And that's why, again, from the same event, it's not only that the story could be slightly or largely different than the event, but actually one event could have different stories. So you want just to tell, a specific one. So if you teach, if you lecture students, and then you picked up one story that happened among maybe 10, 15 stories in the day, then you think, yeah, this is the story that would show my competence in delivering a lecture or whatever. Narratives are essential for our day-to-day communication. We have to speak, we have to tell stories to our friends and family. As language is a crucial device through which people can make sense of the world by telling stories. So actually we can make sense of our world by telling stories. So you've seen something while you're driving back home, so you tell it to your maybe partner or your friend. You see something again in the news, next day you tell it to your students or your lecturer. You see something in the workplace and you tell it to your colleagues in the next department. So it's about making communication more live experience. Narratives can be observed everywhere, every day. There's no certain place or certain time. And people by nature lead storied lives and tell stories of those lives, which is very nice. As you can see, it's about storied life. So a life that has been put like a story, okay? So it's like, you have a friend who you have not seen for maybe like a couple of months or a couple of years, and then you ask them, right, so tell me what happened, how are you doing? And then they start to tell you stories about, things. They make it like a nicer story because they want to catch your attention and attraction as well. We link events that happen today to what has happened before. So we try obviously to make connections between the past and the present and maybe the future as well. So we can really learn something from the narrative. Not only do we tell about what is happening around or within us, but we also communicate to others who we are and what has happened to us, how we ended up being who we are today as a result of what has gone before. So basically, it's about creating or strengthening your identity by saying things about yourself and how what has happened, the story that I've been telling us for almost maybe 15 minutes or 30 minutes, has made you the person in front of me. Narratives are our inherent part of everyday experiences. Narratives are the way in which we make sense of our world. And that's why, obviously, we want to analyze these narratives, which we're going to see in the next slides. So we have different types of narrative analysis. We have like holistic versus the categorical narrative analysis. The holistic analysis basically looks at analyzing each narrative as a whole without decomposing or fragmenting the narrative. While the categorical looks at the categories and themes within one single narrative or across maybe multiple narratives. And this obviously, by doing that, you create themes across narratives. We have also the dichotomy of form against the content. So the form, or the form narrative analysis, is basically looking at the narrative structure and the form it was taken or how it's being told. So it's about, how a narrative is being told. Was the person maybe standing up or sitting down, in distress or happy? It's about, looking at how something is being delivered to you as narrative. While the content is actually the opposite. We try to focus on what has been said in the narrative. So it's the content that is important to us in this. And either way, it doesn't matter. It's actually about, what you are actually looking at in your research questions and objectives. So are you wanting to understand how meetings are delivered on time or are delayed? Maybe you want to see how narratives are formed. You don't care about what they say, but you just want to see because, how they create it may be making things take longer. Or actually on the opposite, you want to see what is the content, because what they are saying in the meeting is actually what makes the meeting taken longer and delayed. Or you could do both. It depends obviously on how you formulate your questions and objectives. Then we have the performative or dialogical analysis. And this is about studying the mirroring between what is told in the story's content, and what happens as a result of telling the story, its effect. So here it's a dialogue, but it's not between you and the speaker, but it's actually between the story itself and the result of telling the story. So you want to see how this person is feeling after they've told us what they've told us. We have visual narratives, obviously, like pictures and videos and lots of these things. Most narrative studies are holistic, focusing narratives, actually, which mean they preserve the whole story, preserving the sequential and structural features that are hallmarks of narrative. Now, I've talked about narrative and narrative analysis. The question is, how can we conduct a narrative analysis? Again, like I've said in previous lectures about thematic analysis, here it's a deliberate engagement. It's not like there's a sequential, hard or rigid sequence that you have to follow, which leads to analyze the narrative. It's actually engaging with detailed stories captured from the research participants, using various tools, approaches, techniques, and you name it. Participants tell stories that show how they view their lives and understand them. And narratives are usually collected by interviewing those people or participants around the topic of interest, but narrative analysis may also include reading written articles, journals and diaries, etc., etc. So it doesn't have to be listening to somebody. You could also read things. Narratives are interpreted in a context, so it's highly contextual, as informed by the conditions under which they were delivered. Taking into account the intended audience and the reasons that the writer may have had for constructing the narrative in a particular manner. So it's about the context here, so you try to understand things in context. It's not you isolate the text from what has been surrounding it. It's actually, as I said, engagement with the text and its context. Narrative research emphasizes the content and its meanings, often presented in the form of structures. The process of storytelling is not mimetic. In other words, the storyteller may have a viewpoint that doesn't exactly represent what has already happened. So as we said before, there could be variations between what has already happened and what has been told. And this variation could be like as minor as you could ignore it, or as major, they could have really understand why there's big, obviously, mismatch between what has been told and what happened actually. In fact, these are a set of different interpretations of events created in a particular setting for specific purposes, for a particular audience, as Mishler said in 2004. This explains again the importance of the context in which a particular narrative has been said. And again, Jocelyn 2015 says, the process of analysis is one of piecing together data, making the invisible visible, deciding what is relevant, what is irrelevant, deciding what is important and unimportant, and linking together what you see as unrelated facets of experiences, but actually when you connect them, they will make sense. Dialogical narrative analysis, the DNA, from its name, you can see that there's dyadic relationship and performative nature that it may entail. It is different than other forms of narrative analysis, that it doesn't seek to locate themes within the narratives as finalizing descriptions or statements about who the research participants are. Rather, it aims at representing individual struggles in all of their ambivalences and unfinalizability. Frank, 2005, also suggests that DNA starts by questions, which we're going to see in the next slide. These are 4 questions that Frank 2011 suggests to start with if you want to do a good, hopefully good, narrative analysis. The first one is about, what multiple voices can be heard in any single speaker's voice. So you're looking at, behind the one line or the voice. There could be multiple voices. So someone could be happy and sad at the same time when they say something. How do these voices merge? And when do they contest each other? Then, second question is, what makes stories distinct from other forms of narration? Or what counts as stories? Or what does not count as a story? Third question is about the why. So why is someone choosing to tell a story? Why is it a story, actually? Among other expressive possibilities. What particular capacities of stories does the storyteller seek to utilize? Then the last one is, how is the storyteller holding his or her own in the act of storytelling? So it's about how you could really keep your identity while you are telling the story. Narrative as an approach. So some common forms of collective data include, or it could be interviews, focus groups, videos, pictures, voice recorders, all sorts of data. Or obviously the question design and the format, the way the researcher approaches these is essential in making the analysis robust. The researcher also needs to design questions to make participants' response sound like a narrative. So obviously when you go to a research interview, you don't tell people that you have to tell me a story, actually. But you have to make or design questions like a plot, which hopefully makes the responses sound like a story. Why narrative data is collected? Well, you have different reasons. We could be maybe thinking creatively about the type of data we collect, to think how participants order and tell their experiences, to consider content, meanings and motives of what they say, or to hand over control and direction to the participant because you want them to own the story. They may occur naturally as part of a reply to a question. So somebody is very good at telling stories. So this could be like fantastic, obviously, for the researcher. It can be preset by asking participants to come along with their story prepared. So you can actually ask them, but obviously you ask them before. So you don't ask them when you meet them, could you tell me the story of what XYZ happened? But you could maybe ask them to tell you the story like a week or a month before. So you have plenty of time to prepare how to tell a story. But obviously, you don't have to expect that it will be a perfect story because people, you do not have the capacity to tell stories all alike. This is Labov and Wolotsky's model of narrative form. So this is about how they structure the narrative. As you can see on the slide, there's abstract, orientation, complication, evaluation, result, and coda. And they have explanation for each of these structures, and they have these questions. So basically, it's like, your narrative should have an abstract, and this is what you can do if you want to get the abstract. So what was this about? So you ask the interviewee, what was this about? Okay, tell me what happened. It's an opening question, so they can give you an abstract form of the narrative. And then your orientation, so you want to orient them towards saying something. So who said that? Who is the person that you've met? What was that's about? Where, when? So you ask them this question just to orient the story into certain different ways. Complication. What happens? So you ask even further. So it goes like that. So you try to ask questions in the hope that they can give you different structures to your narrative analysis. And these are some of the functions of narrative analysis. Obviously, it's beyond the structure. There could be like a moral tale, a warning tale. For example, you can tell something like to warn you of hazard or danger. A tale of identity. Someone is telling about their identity. It could be entertainment, news, a tale with a lesson learned or attached, and there's lots of other types of functions. A final note. As analyzing narratives inherently holds the researcher engaged with the production of the narrative, Hollow and Jefferson in 2000 said or suggested that these 4 questions are used to analyze. So what do we notice? How do we notice what we notice? How can we interpret what we notice? How can we know that our interpretation is the right one? Thank you very much. If you have any questions, drop me a line.